In today's video, I will show you how to save data to a database inside of a Next.js middleware and edge functions. So we will build a request logger middleware that will log and save each request made to our application. For storing the request log, we will use Redis. And don't worry, you don't have to start setting up and learning all things about Redis, thanks to the sponsor of this week's video, Upstash. Upstash makes using Redis as easy as using a REST API. So we don't have to worry about setting up and maintaining the Redis database because Upstash will take care all of that. Let's get started by hopping on to the computer. So here's a short list on what we will do in this video. So we will first create the middleware that will log each request, and let's actually make it so that it only logs the requests made to the API endpoint, so the API routes. And this just makes it a little bit more easier to understand how the middleware works. So we won't log any requests made to the pages of this application. And then inside the middleware, we will actually save those log entries to Upstash Redis. And third, we will create a page for viewing the request log. So for this page, we will actually fetch all the log entries from the Upstash Redis. So let's get started with the coding. So here I have a new fresh Next.js application open. So let's get started by going to the pages folder and to the API folder. And in order to add middleware that handles all the API requests, we want to add a new file to the API folder called _middleware. Like this. So now this file will always run before the API route is run. And let's get started by adding some code over here so we can test it out that it's working. So like this. So each middleware needs to export this middleware function by default. And right here, we are just getting the response. And by getting the response like this and then returning it at the end, it will continue the middleware chain forward. And before we return the response, we will just log this message over here. So this message should be displayed each time we make an API route request. So let's save it and start the server. Like this. And once it's started, let's navigate to it. But now let's go to the API/hello over here. So we get the API route message, and now we should have over here in the console the message we logged. So we can see that the middleware is actually working, so it's been run before the API route is executed. So next, let's actually get some information about this request that we want to log. So I'll delete this message and I will get the current time and then actually make it a readable string. So time str equals like this. So this will be a human readable string of the current time. So next I'll create just a variable that will have some information about the request. Like this. So we save the time and it was the time string over here. Then we get the URL, IP, user agent and the geolocation of the user from that request parameter that was passed for this middleware function. And let's see how it looks like. So let's just log this. And now let's save it and open the console. And I'll switch to the browser and let's refresh this page. And switch to the Visual Studio Code. And over here we can see we logged the log data object and it has the current time, URL, IP, user agent, and all that stuff that we wanted over here. So this will be the data we will save. Of course, if you have an application that you, example, have the logged in user information or some other information you want to save to the logs, you can do it right here. Just modify this object to have all that information that you wish to save to the log. But for this example, we are now ready to actually save that log data. And as discussed earlier, we will use Redis and Upstash for that. So let's hop into the browser and go to the upstash.com web page. So with Upstash, we can host our Redis database. And if you scroll down a little bit, we can actually see that it's designed for Edge, and our middleware is run as Edge function when we deploy it to our shell. So this is very great. And the benefit is that they offer the REST API for using the Redis database. And for Edge functions, this is great because we don't have to manage any connections, client connections with the Redis, and we can just call the REST API whenever we need it. So we won't run into any connection problems that might occur if we used like a traditional Redis client. And we can also get started for free because they have this free tier that has all the things that we need, including the REST API as mentioned. So let's get started by going up here and clicking the console. So right here, we can go to the sign up, and you can sign up using one of your socials or create a new account right here. I already have an account here, so I will go to the login and log in. So once you are logged in, go to the Redis tab up here, and let's create a new database. So we will store the log entries to this database. And let's give it a name, and we can choose to deploy it as a regional or global database. I will use the regional and select the region over here. And we don't need these over here, so I will just click create. And once the database is created, we see this page over here, and if you don't see it, you can click the Redis tab up here and just select your database from there. So now we have our database ready, so we can start saving log entries over here. So right on the details page, we see all the details for this database, and we will come back to that in a second. Then there is the usage tab that will show the usage of the database, and then you can actually query the database right here with this in-browser CLI. And what I like about this is the data browser. So you can see all the data inside your Redis database in this tab, and you can sort it between strings, list, hash, set, and sorted sets. And we will use this list data type for storing our request log entries. So let's set up our application to connect to this Redis database. So I'll switch to the Visual Studio Code, and I will create a new folder on the top level called lib, and then inside of that we'll create a new file called redis.js, like this. And now I'll switch back to the browser, and I go to the details page and scroll down a little bit, and you can see here the REST APIs, and then click this Upstash Redis tab over here. So Upstash actually provides this Upstash Redis NPM package that we can use to interact with the Redis API. And right here, they provide the code how to connect to it from JavaScript. So all this information, the URL and the token will be custom. So when you open up this page, it will have the connection information for your database. So this information is for my database. So we can just copy it over here, switch back to the Visual Studio Code and paste it in to the redis.js file. So it will import the Redis from Upstash Redis, and we actually need to install that. So yarn add Upstash Redis, like this. And while that's installing, okay, it went already. So I'll close the console. So we get the Redis from that npm package. Then we will create this Redis client, so to say, with the connection information to our database. And right here, instead of this, we want to export this Redis client like this. So now we can just import this Redis client wherever inside the code we want and use it to interact with the database. So I'll switch back to the middleware file and import that Redis client like this. So right here, we want to save that log data object to the Redis database. And we can do it with the Redis client by typing in Redis dot, and right here we can use all these different functions from the client. And since we will be using the list data type from Redis database, we will type in lpush, which will push this entry to a list. And as a first parameter, we will define the list name. So we can call it the API request log like this. And then the second parameter will be the data we want to push to that list. So the log data object like this. And this operation is asynchronous since it makes the API request to Upstash. So just to see what this returns, I will define a variable and let's add the await keyword. So we will await this request to finish and store the response to the log entry variable. And over here, let's log that log entry like this. So now if everything goes well, this should actually push the log data to that API request log list inside Upstash Redis and then log the response over here. So I'll save this and open the console and start the dev server. And I will go to the Upstash and to the data browser of our database and to the list tab, and I'll refresh it over here. We can see there is no data yet, but now if I go to our application on localhost and refresh this page that opens up the API route like this, and switch to the Upstash back and then refresh this page, we can see that we got the API request log list created and it has some JSON data inside of it. And let's just quickly view what it has. So I will copy it from here and paste it in to the Visual Studio Code. So this is the data that was saved inside Upstash Redis. And we can see it has all the properties that we defined in our middleware over here. So it looks like the data saving is working correctly. And let's open up the console and just see what this middleware, this part over here, logged to the console. So it looks like it just logged 1, which I assume means that the request was successful. So let's close this and actually remove this variable because we don't need it. It was just for us to see what was happening, and we can remove that console log also. And over here, we can actually also remove the await keyword because right now this is blocking the execution of the middleware, and thus it also makes the request slower for the user. And since we are just sending in data for the log, we don't actually need to wait for it because we know it will be going there and this middleware can continue its execution, so this request won't slow down our API route. So I will remove the await keyword and the variable from there and just call the Redis lpush over here with the data as a parameter. So I'll save this and open the browser, and let's actually delete this API request log from the database. And now we again have no data over here. And if I go to our application and refresh the API route page again, go to the Upstash and refresh the database, we can see it works well even after the modifications we made, which is good. So right now we have the logging functionality working. So each API request log is saved inside the Redis database in Upstash. Okay, so next let's create a page to our application that will fetch this data from our database and then show it in the page. So I'll switch back to the Visual Studio Code and I will create a new page inside of here called viewlog.js. And for this, I'll add some boilerplate code to just display the page like this. And let's open the browser and try to navigate to that page. So I'll actually duplicate this tab and just modify the URL. So it was viewlog. And we get the text request log, so the page is working. Okay, so now what we want to do inside this page is first fetch the log entries and then just display the log entries on this page. So I think we won't do any fancy UI stuff over here, and we will just display the plain JSON from the database inside of this page just to demonstrate how it works. First, we want to fetch the log entries, and since there is new log entries coming to the database all the time and we want to display them in real time, let's use server-side rendering for this. So we will use the get server-side props function for that, like this, and over here we can fetch the entries from the database, and we need the Redis client, so I'll import that. So this is the Redis.js we created and used in the middleware too. And over here, let's add a wait because it's an asynchronous function, and then Redis dot, and we can get the list values with lrange function. And the first parameter will be the list name, which was the API request log. And the second parameter is the number of the start item, so the item index we will be starting from, and we want to get all the entries for this example, so we will start from 0. And the second parameter is the index of the last item we want to fetch. And since we want all of them, we can use -1 to tell this function that we want all of the items. So now we are fetching all the entries to this entries variable, and let's pass that as a prop for this component. And I will add a props over here, and let's just like console log that props inside of that component. So let's see if this is actually fetching them correctly. So I'll save this, switch to the browser, and I'll open the DevTools, and I'll refresh the page. We can see we get the entries over here, and looks like it has all the data that was inside of the Redis database. And let me make this a little bit bigger, like this. So it has the data from the database. That's good. So now I'll remove this console log and add some code over here to just display the JSON on the page, like this. So I added a header API request log, and then I'm just mapping through the entries inside of here and returning a div with the pre-element, and then stringifying the JSON for that item and just displaying it over there. And let's see how this looks like. So if I save this and switch back to the browser, we can see it displays the JSON over here. And now, right now, we only have one entry over here. So over here, I have the API route open. So if I, for example, refresh this page 2 times, it should now have 3 entries in the database. So I'll refresh this, and looks like we get 1, 2, and 3 entries over here too. So looks like it's working. It's fetching all the items from the database. And as you can see here, we only get entries for the API route request. So when I'm calling this /API/hello, and when I'm refreshing this view log page, we don't get any new entries over here. And that was because we added the middleware file inside the API route. So this middleware over here will run only when we are calling the routes inside of this API folder. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are not already, because I have more Next.js edge function and middleware content coming up, so you won't miss out on those. And again, I just want to say thank you to Upstash for sponsoring this video. But that's all for now. I'll see you in the next video.